Let me ask you about tariffs. We saw the markets really take a jolt in the last couple of weeks. What's your thought on that as far as the reciprocal tariffs going into effect, at least as of right now, April 2nd, and we've seen some other tariffs already in effect and the reactions from people. The president has said ultimately he wants manufacturing to move back into the United States. What's your take?
I will say this at least, is that he actually did campaign on tariffs. So I will say that. I mean, you know, all the other stuff that is straight out of Project 2025 that he denied, he did not campaign on that. And so I understand why people were confused and concerned and they were like, this isn't what I voted for. But honestly, if you voted for him and you take issue with the tariffs, he did at least campaign on that. So I will give him that much, that he was talking about the tariffs. I don't think he knows what he's doing, but I don't think that that's a surprise for anybody that I believe that. And honestly, you don't have to believe me when I say that he's a failure at this. Again, look at the markets. The markets have been crashing out. 401ks are obviously taking a dip right now. And frankly, we've not even yet seen how bad the increases are going to be. We've not gotten there yet, right? But we know that costs overall, since he's sworn into office, have kind of crept up. People have been talking about the inflation and how the inflation rate has actually crept up as well. And so
I thought it actually cooled from the last month.
From the last month, but overall, at the rate that we were finally getting down to when Biden was leaving, as soon as he got in, that rate ended up going, the rate of inflation. Let me make sure I'm saying it that way. And so, yes, again, he's only been in 60 days and this is already what you're doing. But I will say that, you know, I've tried to explain tariffs. I do think that people, even when he was campaigning, some were kind of confused about it. They thought that it would be taxes on somebody else. They didn't realize that basically the money, the cost gets passed on to us. Also, I don't think that there was ever a conversation around, because I don't remember him attacking our friends on the tariffs when he was campaigning. There was a lot of talk about China, and I think that people are kind of like, okay, well, that's fine, it's China, right? But I don't think that he ever campaigned saying, hey, our friends to the north and our friends to the south, we're going to end up in a trade war with them. I don't recall that part of his campaigning. And I think people are just now learning things like, oh, if you were already complaining about the cost of housing, do you know how much lumber and how much steel we get from Canada? Well, now you're finding out, right? Because they are one of our great trade partners on that stuff, and we need that for building. Even when it comes to energy, when Canada threatened to cut off energy, you know how many people probably didn't know that that was something that they didn't know, right? So he did campaign on it, but was it full transparency and were people fully aware? No. And the idea of, you know, making enemies of our friends while making friends with our enemies is absolutely insane and wild. And as it relates to the underlying kind of alleged purpose of bringing manufacturing back, the Infrastructure Act did that. The Chips and Science Act was doing that. You know what he's trying to do? He's trying to gut the funding under both of those bills. He wants to pull back and rein in the monies that was for that. The reason that, you know, places like Ohio have in a very small town in Ohio, they're getting a new chips manufacturing site. Well, that's thanks to Joe Biden. Same thing here in the state of Texas. We ended up benefiting and getting a new chips manufacturing site here in Texas. And listen, we've got some chips manufacturing sites. We've got one in the district, actually. And so, but literally a large new installation was coming in. And for people that don't understand the importance of chips, and it was my predecessor that led the way on this, as she was the chair of the Science and Technology Committee at the time, is when we went through COVID and we saw like how much TVs were and all kinds of stuff, and we were having these supply chain issues because we were getting so much out of China. And to be fair, the vast majority of our chips in the world, if there's one place that we get them from, is Taiwan, right? And so Taiwan is kind of like, that is like where they've kind of cornered themselves as far as the market is concerned, even though chips are a Texas thing for sure. And so the idea was, let's at least diversify, let's open this up and create jobs, right? So if we ever end up in another one of these supply chain issues, we won't have this issue where we don't have new cars coming out because we don't have enough chips, or we don't have the new there was so much that we couldn't get, or the prices spiked because we couldn't get them. And a lot of it is because everything that we have has a chip, except for your glasses. It's like the only thing that doesn't have a chip. Everything else has a chip. So I think that there's a lot of ways to figure out where we could play in the supply chain and where we could be experts. And I think it was great that we went with chips because we know the history of chips in this country. So I thought that was really smart. But there's a lot of other things that we could be doing. We could figure out another space that's a niche area for us. For instance, when we think about farming in the state of Texas, cotton is something that we do really big. We do everything in agriculture big in Texas. But I didn't know until I was on the ag committee that we literally take kind of this raw cotton and then we send it out of the country to get it processed, and then we bring it back in. Well, what if we just did it all here? Maybe that would work. Maybe that's something that we could corner, right? But I think that it's a matter of kind of listening and even talking to our farmers and figuring out, if we are going to go to alternative fuel sources, like what does that look like? Is there something that they could raise to do this? I think that there's a lot of things. I think that when we even talk about green energy and what that looks like, there's a lot of new jobs to be created. And I know that people probably are like, oh God, she's being a lefty right now. But most people don't know that in the state of Texas, we, again, do everything bigger, including all energy. We have the largest wind farms in the entire country right here in Texas. So we do all big energy, not just the dirty energy. We do the clean energy as well. And I think that that's what you saw in the previous administration, was this forward-thinking mindset of trying to figure out what is futuristic, trying to make sure that they can encourage STEM education and things like that. Instead, now you have an administration that doesn't value education and wants to set us back and wants all these other countries to zoom ahead of us as relates to what it is that we're learning, what it is that we're creating. And frankly, the world has historically relied on us to lead. That is why we were able to lead with the COVID vaccines, because we have been working on technology. We were forward thinking. And right now we have some people that are dead set on taking us back into the, I used to say the pre-civil rights, and now it feels like the 1800s.